G'day legends, I hope that you are having a fantastic day and so far a great week. Now we do have a little bit to go over today, although it has been a little bit slower on the front line the past couple of days. So of course we're going to have a look at the maps. It'll be in the second half of the video. We're going to look at an interview with an officer and what is really happening at the front line and how deliveries are being affected and potentially coming in too late. We're going to look at targeting of the Kerch bridge and how that may go down and what fallout there may be from that. Of course, we'll look at some strikes into Russia and also into Ukraine. But first off, I want to talk about mobilization again, because as I put up the video yesterday, I remembered something and thought, I'm an idiot, which is a very common occurrence for myself, but I forgot to mention something. What I did mention was that a senior member of the Kiev government was dismissed as well, just pre to this mobilization bill that went through, lowering it from 27 to 25. But what I did leave out, and I should have put in there because I was painting this picture about that there is a massive manpower shortage in Ukraine, was this. Now, this was from a few weeks ago, and you and I did speak at length about this, but that the Parliament's National Security and Defence Committee rejected the amendment on the demobilisation after 36 months of service, without the approval of the headquarters of Supreme Commander-in-Chief on the new mobilisation bill. So this lawmaker, what he was trying to get through is once you've served for 3 years, you are then demobilised. And this wasn't approved by President Zelensky, therefore won't be going through. And the idea of demobilisation is being buried in the Parliament. And this is just more evidence that there is an obvious manpower shortage that is occurring in Ukraine. Not only are they lowering the age, to be then mobilized, to be conscripted, but then efforts like this, and this was a few weeks back, and this is putting the picture together to supply evidence to this. I know you can't use the word evidence when reporting on things, but that there is a manpower shortage. And the problem with this shortage is this can't be fixed by Western support. Ammunition issues, air defense issues, a lot of other issues can be at least holes plugged or somewhat fixed with Western support. This can't be. Yes, there can be training occur. Yes, there can be funding, but at the end of the day, getting either people to sign up or to be conscripted to fight, that can't be fixed elsewhere. It needs to be fixed in-house if it can be fixed. And there are a lot of problems. We have a morale issue. There is a morale issue. You've got, if you're looking at mobilisation conscription, then you've got a lack of people then volunteering to fight. And we know that volunteering comes in peaks and troughs. When things are going well, lots of people volunteer. People's outlook on the war is more positive. When things are going bad, then we see this all go into a trough of volunteering and the outlook further on the war. And also, we will see people flee when there's forced conscription. This is one of the reasons why the conscription is going then to an online basis. Now, with no results on the front line and nothing but bad news coming in, when you see that Russia is gaining ground, they're using new weapons more successfully, and then there's limited US support, all of this just builds this picture of the problem that is happening with manpower at the moment. Now, it's not just losses on the front line, although of course that is a huge contributing factor. It's also people's outlook on the war and, well, what am I going to change in this? Will I just be sent to die? And that is a realistic outlook for these young guys. I sympathize with any young guy who's staring down the barrel of that. And I can see why people choose to do things like flee out of the country. And I believe that we'll probably see more of this. Now, I believe another big contributing factor to this has been propaganda backfire. That since 2022, we were told, again, everyone was told, Russia is on the verge of imminent collapse. They're out of missiles. Now, 2 years on, more than 2 years on, missiles fall on cities with far more effect and accuracy than they did in the beginning. And this will have a huge effect on how people see and feel and have further outlook on the war and conscription. Now, I've pulled up just a few old articles just to show you what I mean by this. So this was in March 25th, so a month and 1 day after the beginning of the war, Russia running out of precision munitions. We have then this article here from, when is it? 26th of December 2022, so still in the first year of the war, from Kirilo Budanov, Ministry of Defense. The remaining number of missiles, if we take their calculations purely mathematically, will be enough for the intensity of a salvo of 70 to 75 missiles on average for 2 or 3 times. And in principle, they'll run out altogether. So only 2 or 3 more missile waves since then. We know that has been proven false. Then we have the defense minister at the time, Alexei Reznikov, then have things like this released. We see these released everywhere, but the demilitarization, that this is the percentage of missiles and how many are then left over of these. And then we have a second one here. So this one was the first one. What dates are we doing? Feb 23, so a day before the beginning till then October the 12th. And then we have this one from Feb 23 to about a month later in November that we see the percentages here that saying that there is a real missile shortage. And I'm not calling out the percentages on these. I won't try and claim that, but saying that they're out of missiles, that Russia is not learning, developing on the front line, or increasing the fighting capability is just wrong. It has been proven wrong, and I think that propaganda in the beginning was unbelievably successful. And now I think that it is actually having a huge backfire on what is then happening. And speaking of those missiles, and then today we see the Foreign Minister Dmytro Kuleba release this, talking about Patriots, talking with Poland, discuss how Poland can contribute to defending Ukrainian airspace from Russian missiles and how to protect Polish airspace from their incursions. Ukraine is currently the only country in the world that defends itself against ballistic missile attacks almost every day. This means that all Patriot batteries available around the world that can be provided to Ukraine must be delivered to Ukraine as soon as possible. There is no more important place for them. But you can see what I'm getting at is just this shift in reporting and shift in facts, and where people are going, what is actually happening? If I'm staring down the barrel of being conscripted, what is happening? And the lack of good news coming out has a huge effect on morale of the whole country and people volunteering to fight, going to fight, and how they'll then feel about conscription. Realistically, there has been no really good news coming off the front line for a long time. And I'm often criticized incredibly heavily for my doom reporting in Ukraine. And personally, I report news as I see relevant. And to be fair, in the first 12 months of the war, I was, super sort of over and, sort of drinking the Kool-Aid. But in the last 12 months or more, there's been realistically not much real good news for Ukraine. We had Kherson, which was, the last real, up here and in Kharkiv, that was the end of 2022. Then we had the 2023 failed counteroffensive. And since then, we've had Russia making ground, getting more troops, having more success with weapons. And the soldiers, voluntary soldiers and potential conscripts, they will see this as well. And this goes into the whole umbrella of how this can be sort of malignant, that you may have poor results because you can't get people, but people don't want to come because of then those poor results. But I'm not trying to be doom and gloom. I'm just reporting on how I see things going. At the moment, I don't see that things are going very well. And will this shift potentially what's happening? Well, there's going to have to be something changed. But I had someone reach out to me who I know, and I won't say who this is, but yeah, you get it. Not that my opinion matters, but I watch your work fairly regularly now. I really appreciate it a lot more. The war got a lot more real for me in Kherson. I despise the whole Russia is stupid, Ukraine never loses cheerleading now. You never towed that line. I was on the fence about your work back then, but now keep doing what you're doing, mate. You catch a lot of hate from the community, and I was kind of on that bandwagon when we met, but everything is a bit more real now. And I think this is swinging to what I'm talking about. And I think people are starting to sort of wake up to the reality of what is happening and go, well, look, we can cheer on that they're out of missiles, whatever, but they're still falling. Maybe we need to look at Patriots and recruitment and more stuff going into Ukraine. We need to look at it realistically, because if you have rose-colored glasses on, you'll end up in the position we are now, where we were told Russia was collapsing imminently for days and days and days. And now when that's not happened, then what do we do now? And I want to talk about an article that's come out from Politico, and then we'll talk about the Kerch Strait Bridge that I think ties this then together. So this is from then Politico here. Now, they interviewed some anonymous officers. The officers, I said, there's great risk of the front lines collapsing wherever the Russian generals decide to focus their offensive. We spoke about this yesterday, that Russia most likely will put in one spot and try and push there. Probably Avdiivka is most likely in that front where they've had the success. We're going to look at Avdiivka and the problems that are going to come for Russia and the terrain there a little bit later on from someone on the front line. Now, we'll talk about the aerial bombs and just how many numbers they actually have. Russia will likely be able to penetrate the front line and crash it in some parts. Of course, these guys are anonymous, saying there's nothing that can help Ukraine now because there are no serious technologies able to compensate Ukraine for the large mass of troops Russia is likely to hurl at us. We don't have those technologies, and the West doesn't have them, well, in sufficient numbers. I've talked at length about this. We speak about breakthroughs and offensives, and I ask, what has actually changed? What is different from last year's failed offensive and successful defensive from Russia in those defensive lines till now or till next year? What is changing? Tell me what is changing and why there's going to be success this time rather than last time. And this is the problem. For technologies against FPV drones, glide bombs, it's so hard with the cost. They can be hit out of the air, but does the cost actually add up for the damage? It's so hard developing these technologies, and a lot of the technology that the West does have is either something like your Taurus or other systems that they're not willing to hand over to Ukraine. But even in the amounts they have, the West, I believe, is so focused on technology, on quality rather than quantity, and that is our downfall in some of this. We see this with the shell shortage that has been artificially created, not in Ukraine, but around the world, because we're failing to just produce shells. We keep funding, well, let's build this shell with 3 dildos on it that can fucking hit someone at 50 k's away, rather than instead of making that, let's just make 50,000 of them a fucking week. Anyway, according to him, it is only Ukrainian grit and resilience, as well as errors by Russian commanders that may now alter the grim dynamics. This is something we have seen. Has it been a lot of success strategically, tactically, or failures by Russian command? Now, we'll talk about Kherson, Kharkiv, where Ukraine had the most effect and the most amount of ground taken. Yes, the Ukrainian grit, resilience, and strategy there was great. They took advantage of it. But also, was Russia fucking up? There's the very famous video meme that went around of the Ukrainian soldiers saying, we're lucky that they're so dumb, or they're so stupid, however it was worded, words to that effect. But now that it seems like that is shifting and they are learning from the mistakes, they're having more problems. You can't just rely on Russia making errors and mistakes, like this officer then says. However, the high-ranking Ukrainian officers reminded that relying on Russian errors is not a strategy. You can tell that I've read this previously, but it is true. They were also scathing about Western foot dragging, saying supplies and weapons systems came too late and in insufficient numbers to make the difference they otherwise could have. And we've seen this with the air defense, we've seen this with the shells, we've seen this with many, many things, even the Abrams, other systems like that. It's sort of too little, too late, not making a difference. And in this as well, I think talked up that the Abrams, the Leopards, the Charlies were talked up as this Wunderwaffen that it just wasn't. Now, that's not saying that the Russians didn't do it and continue to do it about the T9, the T14, the Su-57, but it's proven that they're not, and they came in too little, too late, and not in enough numbers or the technology. Anyway, Zaluzny, of course, replaced by Syrsky, used to call it the war of one chance. By that, he meant weapon systems become redundant very quickly because they're quickly countered by the Russians. For example, we use Storm Shadow and Scalp missiles supplied by Britain and France successfully, but just for a short time. The Russians are always studying. They don't give us a second chance, and they're successful in this. And this is something that it was just being ignored, I feel, that Russia can actually learn, they can change, and we've seen this, and we've seen the in the last couple of months or last weeks especially, how the counters to these systems have been vastly improved with the HIMARS, striking HIMARS, striking Patriots, increased ISR, that to just think that they're not going to learn, adapt, overcome problems is going to be a downfall. And this is exactly what these guys are saying. Although I will say we still do see Storm Shadow and Scalp having successful strikes, but we don't really know how many are fired to how many are actually hit and shot down either. That you'll often hear it's 100% success rate is going through, and many are saying that's not the case. There's many go in, some leak through. We're not too sure. These guys will know far more than I. Don't believe the hype about them just throwing troops into the meat grinder to be slaughtered. They do that too, of course, maximizing even more the impact of their superior numbers. But they also learn and refine. Speaking about the HIMARS and things like shoulder-fired anti-tank, your JAVs, what was the other one? 84 mil Carl Gustavs, and this of how they were used, enabling to push Russia back in Kherson. But often, we just don't get the weapon systems at the time we need them. They come when they're no longer relevant. Citing the F-16s as an example. We've spoken about this. A dozen or so F-16s are expected to be operational this summer, so a couple of months after basic pilot training has been completed, saying every weapon has its own right time. The F-16s were needed in 2023. They won't be right for 2024. F-16s are an air superiority fighter. We spoke about, should a multi-role fighter be better off? Now, F-16s will add a big element to air power for Ukraine. Is it going to switch the air dominant superiority? No, it's just not going to have that, as well as the restrictions put on them, the amount of them, and the capabilities just of F-16. And needed in 2023, I can see where he's coming from, saying for the offensive, to support those armoured movements in time. And now for 2024, all we hear about is air defence, air defence, air defence, and maybe next year it will switch again, that it's sort of you're one step behind what is needed. And of course, this comes into politics, bureaucracy, and how long things can actually take to change and adapt. But I believe this to be correct. And I think you and I have spoken in length somewhat about this as well. How much effect is it going to have for the cost of the bloody system? You're speaking billions when you're talking fighter jets. And we know right now, if you were to give any Ukrainian guy, like, what do you need? Be air defense, arty. Fuck the F-16s. We need that now. But money, funding, troops are being held up with other things. Now, I'm not saying that I'll do this better. I'm just showing you what we are observing happening. And that's because, according to the officer, Russia is ready to counter them. In the last few months, we started to notice missiles being fired by the Russians from Drugarsky in northern Crimea, but without the explosive warheads. We couldn't understand what they are doing. And then we figured out they're range finding. The officer explained that the Russians had been calculating where best to deploy the S-400 missile and radar systems in order to maximise the area they can cover to target F-16s, keeping them away from front lines and logistics hubs. So we'll fire a missile in with fuck all on it, see where then it gets intercepted, see where radar systems are picking it up, whatever. Okay, then we can move this forward. This is where we put our own AD systems, which an S-400, if it gets a lock on an F-16, you're in bad way. Look at Gulf Wars, F-16 shot down by far less superior systems. We know Turkey, S-300s, S-400s, and F-16s as well. It's a bad day for an F-16, moving those forward and limiting where those will then move. The officers also said that now need more basic traditional weapons as well as drones. We need howitzers, shells, hundreds of thousands of shells and rockets. We told the Western partners all the time that we have the combat experience, we have the battlefield understanding of the war, and that they have the resources and they need to give us what is needed. And I agree with this 100%. The Western militaries, I was part of one. We have fuck all conventional warfare combat experience in modern war. Sorry to my fellow guys out there. This is not to take anything away from the service that you and I did and any of our mates. It's not to do that. But conventional warfare, modern warfare, drones, artillery, fighter aircraft, where you are the underdogs too. Yes, I know guys have gone up against fighter aircraft and tanks, but not when we have been the underdogs in that. We needed to listen to what Ukraine has said, but not maybe some guys sitting in an ivory tower somewhere. The soldiers, the officers on the ground, and what do then they need? And like he's saying here, we need howitzers, so artillery pieces and shells and drones. And we need to listen to what they need and not try and put it on to them. And I see this with some of the training, and I have a lot of friends training Ukrainian soldiers in the Great Britain at the moment, speaking about the training is not fucking relevant. They're going, these guys have 10 times the experience we have. Yes, we may have better rifle handling skills and basic soldiering skills, but the experience is with these guys. They could teach us bloody more about the battlefield than us. None of us have been under direct fire from a fucking fighter jet or a BAB. And some of what we're teaching them is like, well, do you see this or not? And we saw this, say, with the Leopard training when, it was said that the Ukrainian soldiers, the Thankyous, asked, what do we do about a minefield? Oh, try and go around it if you can. You can't go around these bloody minefields down in the south. These minefields are the whole front line. Anyway, sorry, that's just my rant done. I care about this because I care about bloody young men's lives being thrown into this. For what we're seeing change is 0.01% of land month to month, and it's just attriting down young people's lives over years. Now, we need to talk about the Kerch Strait Bridge, and has the window for making a huge tactical difference if this bridge gets taken down, has it actually closed? So, of course, the Kerch Strait Bridge connects here Russia to Crimea, Ukraine, up through here. It sits right where my cursor is down here. And since the beginning of the war has always been this bridge needs to come down because this is where supplies are coming through into Crimea, into the south, into Kherson. This is how the Russians are supplying it. And there has been a attack by a truck on it, attack by missiles on it. All this hasn't yet gone down and seemed to be repaired fairly quickly each time, as well as a decoy barge set up near it as well as protecting from other assets. We know they've sunk ships around it or whatever, because Russia knows this is a large target too. But we're going to talk about, has the sort of the window closed in this? So we have this today from the GUR that I believe this is from, adding from Budanov. We'll do it in the first half of 2024. So this is in the next, April. So it's got to be in the next 8 weeks that we'll see that this goes down. He said most of the means to carry out this goal. So not all of it, but most of it. We're not sure how that will go. We know that Ukraine desperately wanted a Taurus system. We know that the German high-ranking officers talked about the Taurus taking this down as well, but those Taurus, they're not going in. GUR's officials indicated it was a shaping operation prior to another attack on the crossing. So taking out these ships with those Magura V5, the seaborne drone kamikaze things, was shaping up to then take down this bridge out here. The bridge has been hit and repaired twice by drones and then as well by then that truck with a bloody bomb on it. If the bridge were permanently compromised, now this came out today from The Guardian, Moscow would be forced to transport military supplies by road through occupied southern Ukraine. Somewhat incorrect from the journalist on this, I believe. So let's talk about these two. If it was compromised, that things aren't getting in. So what we know, and this was from March 25th, so only a week and a half ago, SBU head, Russia no longer using Crimea Bridge for weapons supplies after repeated strikes, that they're not choosing now not to use the Crimean Bridge for weapons because of then these strikes on this. This is from March 25th by the SBU. Now, also what we know, and we've looked at many photographs of this over the last 12 months, and what Putin has come out with, but the photos prove this as well, that March 18, so 2 weeks ago, Putin says, it was reported to me that just this morning, the railway from Rostov, Donetsk, Mariupol, Berdyansk has been rebuilt, and we will continue this work, and trains will shortly run directly to Sevastopol. And it will be another alternative route instead of the Crimean Bridge. In this, that confirms that the Crimean Bridge is a large target, and Russia has had to do something if that gets taken out. But from the photographs, from the statements, what we know is from Rostov here, Mariupol, then Berdyansk, sit down here, Melitopol, and then down into Sevastopol. There are road networks, and there's also a brand new train line through here as well, putting relief on the Kerch Strait Bridge, as well as the SBU says that they're now not using it for weapon systems, that the tactical advantage that bridge had for the first 2 years or more of war, does that still exist? Now, I'm not saying it doesn't. It's more of a question to you, but I think the relevance of that bridge has reduced as well. I think this ties in with what these guys are saying here about they come when they're no longer relevant. So the ability to take down that bridge has come now that it's no longer relevant. Tell me if you think I'm wrong, but that is just what I am saying. Now, we're speaking about Rostov here, so I'll speak about one more thing. We know that Ukraine has attacked then a grain facility in Rostov here. It is on fire. It's a couple of 100 kilometers behind the front line. We're not sure exactly what's hit this. We know it's a drone. We don't exactly know how much damage is here either, but Ukraine will continue its attacks against Russia and grain and oil and gas to try and hit the economy, because the economy is funding the war and can continue to fund the war for a number of years. We don't really know. Some will say 2, some will say 7, some will say 10. I've heard people say that if you were to give it several years and the economy shifts into wartime, the declaration of war, then it's not looking good from there of how they can continue to fund the war almost indefinitely as long as the pace doesn't change. And what we are hearing is more sort of confirmation in this, because we hear the Western officials more and more and more say that if Ukraine doesn't get the funding now, that Russia's going to attack the West. Well, I thought they were collapsing in 2022 out of missiles. How can that be a risk if that was true and this was true? So I think some of the propaganda is having a backfire and people going, hang on, what the fuck? Like with the message I got off my dear friend about that. But, okay, I'm getting worked up. I get worked up because I legitimately care. I lie in bed every night, thinking about this and thinking about running through scenarios, running through what's right, what's wrong, what's happening. I legitimately give a shit. Yes, this is my job, but I really, really, really care about the people, the men fighting, whether they're Russian or Ukrainian. I care about the men fighting, and I just think there's fatal mistakes being made in just the informational space that is actually having a huge effect on what is happening. And I fucking hate blatant, obvious, bloody lies. But here we go on the maps. We have Ukraine, the capital of Kyiv, and then we have the red areas occupied since 22, and then the purple since 2014. Now, I want to come down into Avdiivka first, just to show you a couple of things and some information off the front line of which I was sent. So what we spoke about yesterday was this move up to Urmansk that many of the maps had been showing, both pro-Ukrainian maps, Syriac map. A lot of maps are showing this. This doesn't show up, but we see from yesterday till today, we just see an expansion of the grey zone. Now, this grey zone is matching where a lot of the other maps were showing red zone up to here. So, look, Olivka, Tonenki, Urmansk. Now, I'm just in the slightly wrong area here, but you'll get an idea of where I am. So, this is Urmansk. Let me do north. This will be easier for you. So, Tonenki, Olivka, Urmansk. So, this is saying it's red, where the other map is then showing grey. Either way, we know by this map that there has been some Russian expansion of control because the grey zone has shifted. Now, we step back and then forward. We do see that has been a shift up near Badachi as well, that more of Badachi in the east has then gone west and come under more of Russian control there. That is lining up with what other maps are saying. And as well in Semenivka, we're going to talk about, we have seen there's a small advance of Russian control here as well. Many maps showing that there is actually a crossing of the Durna River here as well, that the Russians are on this other side. And we're going to talk about the problems in this. So let's look at then Avdiivka on then this map. So I got sent from a trusted friend of mine, anonymous, as always. Anything you ever send me will be, too much shit talking, will be anonymous. Sent me this photograph of a huge explosion here. Now, this explosion was from a few months ago as well. But I said, bloody huge, is it a fab? I'm not sure if it's any interest to you, but that strip in the background is the river, so the Durna River, 100 metres of the crossing you reported in Semenivka. That water ain't 50 metres across and not so deep. So it's not, he's saying that this water here, it's not much of a crossing and it's not very deep as well, and that it is, yes, a fab. Now, sends me now, this isn't anything new, it's not giving anyone new information, but he points out whereabouts this sort of is. So we come down into Olivka, we see where, let's pull this back a little bit, we see where these road crossings are. So it's sitting somewhere just down in here where that actual strike was, and we're going to have a good look at the river. But if you're a Ukrainian machine gunner, the way the ground rises, it would be difficult to hit any Russians with direct fire up, even up to the road, that Semenivka side. So on the western side where Ukraine currently control. Looking to the right of that pic would be where the road hooks around to the bridge to Olivka. So you're looking, let's bring up this photograph again. So let's, technology on me again. Looking to the right of this picture. So here, hooks around to the bridge to Olivka up in here. So we're looking that way on it, and the bridge that sits in here down into Olivka. So we're going to get down and actually have a look at the ground and see what he's talking about. I just have one more. But I don't have a sit rep, but common sense with the terrain. Russian crosses the river, but they get some good low ground. But to get beyond that, it's going to be tough. Terrain is everything. Company and squad actions are going to be tough. So let's come down in here and have a look exactly where we are then talking about. So right sort of about where this impact was is somewhere here in Semenivka, looking across the bridge in Olivka. This is where it's showing. But let's talk about the low ground issues and dead ground issues in here. So I wish I could show you how dead ground works, but imagine you're looking over a paddock and then it sinks down. You've got you of course can't see down into that. That's why elevation is so important. But say you're standing, you can't see down in there. That's dead ground. You don't know if someone's there, you don't know if a tank's there, depending how deep it is. That is then dead ground. So Suryak is saying that the Russians have crossed across here. Now, if we look directly down this road, and of course we're well above eye level here, but you can see that there is dead ground heading into Semenivka. It does roll down and it's going to be difficult. Now, opposing this, we come more through Semenivka. See, you can't see what's down behind this hill. That is then dead ground. What he's speaking about as well is it's going to be very difficult if you're a machine gunner down into here. I wish I could go lower and show you up, but it's going to be actually difficult to get then the elevation on that gun to hit up onto this, both in these locations here as well. That being in the low ground, shooting up, you're going to have a struggle on that as well. That is here, and he's bloody soldier. And that is exactly what he's then speaking about in these areas, and we can see that in multiple directions. This crossing up near Badachi as well, we see then the dead ground heading through here, where Russia, we do know, is crossing. So we're talking about that, and also looking at just the width of this river and how wide it is in areas where it is more narrow, less narrow, depending on where you are and where then the reservoirs are here. But something he did speak about, and let's just get this reset to north, is beyond that problem of troop movements and ground movements, squad movements in here in that dead ground, how difficult then the terrain is going to be after here. That this is just open bloody terrain. So after Semenivka, there's fuck all for a long time. It is just open bloody fields, tree line to tree line for many, many kilometers till you get to the Vovcha River, which is then the second line of defense. So we're talking from Semenivka, we're out to here, we're talking 10 kilometers of just open ground. I'm saying that this is going to be the bloody problem. What is actually going to be the mission here? Now, what we have, look, we know there's some movement up around here. We're not 100% sure yet, but I think more likely it's going to be an attempt to bring this back up, to push out on a flank here instead of trying to go through the center here because it's just the open ground, to push and somehow try and envelope this area, maybe down this train line. We've seen pushes on that before, not very successfully, maybe out from Badachi across somewhere like this. We're not 100% sure, but using that natural terrain. But speaking about how, the terrain is going to have a huge effect on Russians pushing through that area as well, but also the Ukrainians who are remaining in this area. And what I will say is the Ukrainians who are remaining in this area, we don't know how these roads are looking at the moment. We know they'll be under fire control. That could be having a Divka Mark II, where we have guys having to cross these areas out. If up to a month gets cut, Badachi gets cut, and these areas are then under artillery fab fire control as well. We're not sure how that's then going to actually look. Now, we just need to move down into Verdani, Pervomaysky area here, as we do have an update from Suryak map. So what we're looking at, Verdani, just in the top here, so just this section here is saying that Russia have expanded control out in there. This map, of course, isn't showing that, but does show in the middle of these reservoirs. These maps show incredibly similar of what Russia is actually controlling, I believe even to the road. But during the last hours, Russian army made new advances north and west of Vodiani. So yeah, it's just this little part in here as well. So we have this open area and this open area that is going to be very difficult for Russia to actually contend with. Now, let's push up into then Bakhmut. And many are saying that has the battle for Chasiv Yar begun? So we do know that Russia, by this map, are right on knocking on the door of Chasiv Yar, logically the next place out of Bakhmut, to control the high ground in here before that push to then Konstantinivka, and of course ultimately up into Kramatorsk, Sloviansk. Of course, that is a long way off, but this push up, has it really begun in Chasiv Yar? We spoke yesterday about the issues in here regarding then the closed terrain out from Ivanovsky as well, but this is a Noel Reports map that we have here. So we're just going to have to line this up. So this is Ivanovsky up here, and we can see on this map, let's see where this road pushes down, that this is showing very similar of the level of control just out here, but he's confirming there was some gain out to this direction here. Other maps are showing up to then these first areas are under Russian control, but they're not maps that I use regularly. So yeah, I'm not going to use them today. So we'll just push up from the north here a little bit. We'll come up to this Berestov, Vesely. I call this then the Seversk front. And we're going to talk about this region here. We haven't seen much change here for a while. We know the train line comes through. This is, of course, a very important area. And let's then line this up. So we have Vemimka here. So train line running down, and Justin here saying that this area has been closed up. This dot here is Berestov. Russian army managed to recapture some of the lost positions at the end of February, along with new positions northwest of Berestov. So there has been some shift in positions there, but this map isn't showing any changes in that or anything north of there. This map doesn't actually show any other changes. We'll come down into Novomylivka here. We do know there's been a lot of changes in here over the past couple of weeks, from very little control to that first push in. And then this map shows probably the least amount of control, even from like the NOAA reports map. He shows something more like, I believe, sort of like that in there. We spoke about that at length yesterday. I'm sure we'll speak about it tomorrow, but we need to have a look at then the Syriac maps here. Let's just get a little bit better of a vision. So it's saying just up into the north here, this is this square paddock, this angled paddock, that there has been an expansion of control looking like this up here. But then as well down in the south, we can see this paddock is this paddock here, that there has been an expansion out across where my cursor is right now. Of course, to the south, closing up and fire control into Novomylivka, but also looking at where then the high and low ground of a terrain map is here. That up in the north, getting more of the high ground, and down in the south, getting more of the high ground as well. Of course, this sitting between Novomylivka, Konstantinivka, sitting in low ground through here. One thing I will say when we look at terrain maps is, depending on the type of topographical map you have, it may not show topographical by meters rise. It may show topographical by compared to other areas. So how does that make sense? So it may show what's relative to around it. So it may look very high, but relatively might actually not be. So relatively may be high, but you might only have a rise of 20 meters, if that makes sense. The way you do the Himalayas is very different to how you do then open ground. So I'm just in the wrong area. Let's come down to Novomylivka. Let's actually have a look at this high ground. So this is what I'm getting at, is it's not like you're on a bloody mountain here. It's relatively flat, but I think the relative topographical map may show that it's more extreme than it is. But any high ground in flat areas are very important. We spoke about near Semenivka as well, about how important that will be, of course, sinking down into these areas down in here. Now let's look at then what Syriac says then about this. Ukrainian-Russian War Day 770. Situation southwest of Donetsk. During the last 3 days, Russian army has increased the pressure over Ukrainian army deployed in Novomylivka following the advance from the north. We spoke about that, where the forest belt was taken, and from the south, where the troops took full control over the trench system. It is important to note that the advances are taking place along two heights. So here we talk about along two heights. Two heights whose capture will cause the withdrawal of Ukrainian forces from the locality and serious endanger the supply route to Ugledar from the south of Konstantinivka. So we do know that Ugledar is incredibly important for the entire front line. I just need to check. I've done everything. So Konstantinivka and down into Ugledar. This is why this area has been so fought for and so easily defended. But so defendable, I should say. Is this supply down into Ugledar from Konstantinivka, from these other areas up here, and these major roadways running. But if there is advancement in this southern part that may threaten this road and a withdrawal from Novomylivka, it is going to threaten this Ugledar. We know that Ugledar, this is why the Russians spent so many troops and assets trying to get this a good 6-12 months ago, and failed there, because they do know if this was cut off, then the road through Konstantinivka to Mariinka, this was getting closed up. And you can see how this could have an effect if there is a push here, closing up these areas and areas down in here as well. But legends, hope this wasn't too much ranty. I know some people like my rants, some people hate my rants, but either way, I hope that you are having a fantastic day, and I'll speak to you tomorrow. Thank you. Bye-bye.